which sophomore quarterbacks do you want to build around? And Jane Daniels quite literally went with the first pick in this draft. Our guy Ray Garvin took him first overall. So it's kind of, he's the obvious answer, right? Like he is the obvious answer of that is the guy there. And then there is sort of a drop off to obviously Drake May and Caleb Williams. A lot of optimism for those guys because they were the first 2 picks in the second round in this draft.
Yeah, I mean, Daniels, like you said, in a tier of his own. This question isn't really about Daniels. I don't think there's any reason to talk about him. We're all super excited about him. In my rankings, I have him just below Josh Allen. He would be my second pick, but if you want to say that's because I'm a Bills fan here, maybe a little bit, but regardless, no one's going to argue with those guys at the top of the draft. So I don't think we need to spend too much time there. Daniels is a fantastic quarterback. He's going to have a great career. The debate is more about the other guys here. And I think that's where it gets really interesting because Bo Nix basically broke out for fantasy last season, right? He finished as the QB9 in fantasy points per game. He went at the end of the second round in this one. And then those other guys that I mentioned in Drake May and Caleb Williams, they went at the very, very top of the second round. And I get that. I mean, they're a little bit younger than Nix. I think they do probably offer higher ceilings than Nix. I think people would agree on that. I talked about Caleb. I talked about May. And I talked about JJ McCarthy as well when I wrote my breakouts column this year that's up at Yahoo that went up a couple weeks ago. And Caleb, again, another guy that I don't know that we need to spend too much time on. We've talked about his situation and what's changed there from last year, the upgrade in coaching, the better offensive line. Like I just said, it might take a little bit of time for everything to gel, even the new pieces, the rookies there, the weapons that he has. But I do think it is going to come together for him. And I will say, like at the end of last year, after they made that quarterback change or coaching change, he had 3 top 12 fantasy weeks over his last 7 games, right? So he showed that it is in him. It is still there. And you figure with Ben Johnson coming over, he's eventually going to find that and hit that high end upside. May also had a really solid season as things went along. I mean, in the 9 outings where he played at least 85% of the snaps last year, he never finished lower than QB 17. And if you take the averages that he had during those 9 games, you put him over a full season, he would have been right in the low end QB1 conversation for fantasy. So upgraded coaching there, upgraded weapons, another guy that I think you got to feel really good about. And then McCarthy, I mean, the investment in a first round talent, I think is normally a pretty smart move, especially when it's a guy that had an injury last year, who has a chance now to be around this really great offense, to learn everything, to settle in. It wasn't like he got thrown out there as a rookie last year and, had an opportunity to develop some bad habits or something like that. We've heard about how Kevin O'Connell sat down with him. They've been having these meetings all year long. He's made a really, really smart point to do that and not just kind of leave O'Connell or not leave McCarthy off on his own. So you look at him, and I tweeted this a couple weeks ago. I've seen some other people share some things similar to this since, but QBs under O'Connell in Minnesota all been really good fantasy options. So Sam Darnold, QB 11 in fantasy points last year, 18.8 per game. Kirk Cousins was the QB 7 in 2023, 19.3 per game. QB 13 in 2022 for Cousins, 18 fantasy points per game. Even Josh Dobbs, when he was the QB 10, averaging 19.1 fantasy points per game during that 5-game stint that he had as a starter with them when Cousins got hurt a couple of years ago. And Nick Mullens, he was the QB 14. He was averaging 17.9 fantasy points per game when he was in there and under center over the final month that year. So McCarthy, in my mind, you have this first round talent. You have great weapons around him. You have a coach that just seems to, any guy that's out there under center puts up decent fantasy stats. The fact that he's going a little bit later than these other guys, I think in hindsight is going to be a mistake. In the long run, I think he's going to get bumped up right where we're seeing Caleb and right where we're seeing Mago and Nix. I think he would be a second round talent. It might just take, 4 weeks into the season, 8 weeks into the season or something before people realize that. If Sam Darnold can do it in this offense, I'm sorry, not to be a Sam Darnold hater, but if Sam Darnold, after the career he had leading up to that point, was able to produce like that, what is McCarthy going to do in this offense? I think he's going to be great. And then I'm not quite as high on Michael Penix Jr. I mean, I think he's more of a pocket passer. I think he's a little less proven. Last year down the stretch when he was in there, even though Drake London was lighting it up, it's not like Penix was putting up these huge games, and I don't think he's really going to give us that rushing, production at any point. So I feel like he's a little bit further back from those guys, but they're all really great values in this draft. I mean, they're all guys that people should be targeting in dynasty startups, because I think that class, I'm pretty sure that they are all going to hit, and they are all going to be strong NFL quarterbacks for a very long time.
Yeah, like it's like hits to some degree, right? And I think obviously this, where they fell in this draft, really like kind of perfectly encapsulates that. And, you can say like you're apologizing for your Sam Darnold. Like if he did it, then JJ McCarthy can do it. Sam Darnold went in the 11th round in the startup draft. Like to me, he was my QB3 in the 11th round, which I actually felt okay about him being a QB3 because he's probably going to start the entire season for this team, maybe multiple seasons for this team. It's just like, okay, you can lock in a multi-year starter and just you're hoping you never have to start him, but like maybe he gives you a week in a good matchup or something like that. But that's where Sam Darnold is after that season that he just put up with Kevin O'Connell. The entire industry is saying like this was less about Darnold and more about what Kevin O'Connell is giving you. And I don't think you could find anybody out there that's got anything bad to say about the way O'Connell designs offenses, the players that they have locked in there for multiple years. Like you have the best receiver in football, Justin Jefferson, and you just going back and charting Jefferson pretty recently for RP. It's like, man, they just do so much to get that guy free, to get him away from. I mean, it's hard to get him away from double coverage and cloud coverage and too high safeties and stuff like that. But they do a lot to get him free on downfield concepts. And Sam Darnold, to his credit, was willing and able to take and make those throws. We'll see if JJ McCarthy is that guy. But I mean, even if he's not I don't know, like an elite quarterback or becomes a guy that is a top, pushing for top 10 finishes, in these NFL rankings and stuff like that. If he's merely a good starting quarterback, it's going to be hard for him to fail from a fantasy perspective in this offense. I'm curious to hear more about your Bo Nix thoughts here, because I guess maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but I was like a little surprised to see him go in the second round in this draft because, again, maybe I shouldn't be surprised because he's a first round pick who was a top 10 quarterback in fantasy last year. He's a top 10 ranked quarterback this year, and he is going into a second NFL season. So on paper, that should scream, yeah, like no doubt about it, a second round dynasty startup pick in a super flex format. What are maybe we missing here with Nix, or maybe particularly what am I missing here with Nix? Because he's also tied to a great play caller, and he was very, very good in his rookie year.
I mean, I think that's what it is, right? He has some rushing production as well that boosts him up in fantasy and really helped him last season. But I think this is another scenario like McCarthy where people just love this setting. They love the offensive play caller. They love the offensive line he has there. They're starting to build out his weapons. They got him some rookies that came in this season and even a veteran in J.K. Dobbins, who I think is going to have a pretty good role in that backfield as well. But Pat Bryant at receiver and RJ Harvey in the backfield, and you go out and get Evan Ingram at tight end. And now his weaponry is much better than it was last year. And when you have faith in the coach and you have that good offensive line in front of him, I think the Broncos are pretty competitive. I think one of the mistakes that a lot of people make, and I'm trying to, change my approach on this, is I think the pre-draft process for Nix, in my mind, I didn't love him as much as some of these other guys, and he was a little bit older, and I didn't view him on the same level. But for him to come in, produce the way he did, be in this setting where clearly it's going to be fruitful for fantasy, we saw it last year. I think that's where we have to kind of start to switch gears and go, okay, this guy is probably going to be okay. Even if you don't think he's quite as talented, even if he doesn't have the same kind of ceiling that some of these other guys have, like even, Caleb Williams or Drake May, like with the rushing production they could bring too. And with, everything that's around them, I think those guys potentially could vault into that first round next year and be really, really good fantasy quarterbacks for a long time. Nix maybe more of that guy that's just, going to be okay. Never going to have that season where he's a true league winner for you. But a guy that, at the end of the second round, that is where he should go ADP wise. Even though he is a little bit older than a lot of quarterbacks that come out, he's still pretty young, right? So if he's able to do that as a rookie, I think we're going to see something similar this year from him. So why not lock that down in the early rounds and getting him at the end of the second? You always have to think too, like Ray's picking there at the end of the second, like he could have easily taken him early third, and then we'd be called, and Nix went in the third. He didn't go in the second with those other, like all that sort of stuff. But I think the main takeaway for me is you look at this group of sophomore QBs, and they are guys that you should be investing in for fantasy, for dynasty startups. I mean, Daniel's clearly the elite guy. You could rank the next four of this group in really any order in my mind. I still have Williams at the top as my quarterback two amongst this class. But whether it's Nix, whether it's May, whether it's McCarthy, I think all those guys are going to be good. I don't know that there's a bad option. And when you factor in the cost and where they went in this draft, that's when I start to gravitate towards McCarthy and even potentially towards Penix, who I think could be pretty good for where he went.